let's talk about an extraordinary new statistic that's come out from the HFEA. They're the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority. They keep an abreast of all sort of IVF and fertility work in the country, and what's safe, what's not, what works, what doesn't, and how many people are actually using it. And they've come up with an amazing statistics. Nearly 21,000 babies were born after IVF fertility treatment in 2023, the last year of which we've got full data. That means that in an average class of 30 kids, one child in every British class is born as a result of IVF treatment. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, let's talk about this with Dr. Hippocrates Cyrus. He's a consultant in reproductive medicine and the director of King's Fertility. A very good morning to you.
Good morning to you too. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So is this a statistic we should welcome or be worried about?
Well, I wouldn't worry about it. About 1 in 6 couples struggle to conceive, and for many, IVF can be a life-changing option. Of course, it's important to understand that it's not a guarantee, and especially as success declines with age. However, just to give you even more startling statistic, although we say that in the UK now 3.1% of all babies born are born through IVF, actually this is quite low compared to some of European counterparts. So in Denmark, it's 11%. That's about 1 in 10 babies.
Wow.
In Belgium, it's 5% as well. So unless obviously we assume that for some reason, women in Denmark have more fertility problems, actually it just shows that there is a gap between what is the real need and actually what is occurring and happening
as someone
in the UK. So it sounds a lot.
No, exactly. Well, as someone who did IVF in my early 40s, when you got a very low chance of having a baby from that, after I'd had my daughter naturally, I did 3 rounds, all failed. I came to terms that had to splash a hell of a lot of cash to get that. Wasn't eligible on the NHS, and many women, many couples can't get NHS help. So we know there's much greater demand. But isn't the issue here that actually, when you say 1 in 6 couples struggle to conceive, the main reason most couples aren't able to conceive naturally is because both the woman and the man actually are too old, and that we've got a massive issue in this country where young women are and I know so many young women, I'm evangelical on this, are absolutely convinced that they don't even have to think about starting to try and have a baby until their mid-30s, when in fact that is probably for many women the last point at which they can have a baby. And we need to start having an educational programme for men and women, I think from childhood onwards, to say you need to start having babies sooner if you want to have a family.
So you've said many things which are correct there, and I'd like to unpick some of it. So you're correct that while IVF is a powerful tool in our fertility treatment arsenal, it should never replace proper family planning or fertility education. And women and men need to be clear and have accurate information about how fertility changes over time and what current treatments can and cannot do. And it's important to say that knowledge is key to making these informed decisions. It's also important to say that the average age of women having children in the UK has steadily gone up over the decades. It's now 31. The average age for having IVF is 35 and above, which obviously is above the sort of natural optimal time for conceiving. But it's also important to say, and I think this is quite a crucial point with a lot of the policies you were talking before about the social welfare bill and the rest, is that currently in the UK, we have about 1.44 babies born per woman, which is below the replacement level of 2.1, which means we're having fewer younger people who will be able to look after more and more older people, a smaller tax base. And actually, this is a proper issue that is way beyond just what justice is. It's actually a societal.
Yeah, we've covered this many times on the show. It's a crisis in the whole of the West and indeed the East, isn't it?
And unfortunately, it's not just about provision of IVF. Even in countries where, like Denmark, where they have a lot of use of IVF and a lot of it is actually on their national health service, they also have and in Sweden, very sort of similar sort of declining birth rates. So it's not just about IVF. It's not just about, simple possibly simple policies like more paternity and maternity leave like in Sweden. It's much more deep than that. And I think that is something that we all have to come together and think.
No, there's lots of issues about housing costs, student debts and people settling down. There are lots of issues there. But the reality is most people want to have family. Most women want to have a family, and a huge number of people are not going to have a family. And a lot of them are relying, and I know so many women who say, well, I've frozen some eggs, so I'm just going to have a baby when I'm at the peak of my career at 38, 40 or whatever, when the reality is that IVF doesn't actually have the level of success as a rate of success that a lot of people think it has.
So you're absolutely right. So on average, about a third of IVF cycles will be successful. But again, that is an average. So when you look at breaking it down across sort of age groups, if you're less than 35, that goes up to 40 something percent. But actually, if you're 43 to 44, that is actually 5%. And beyond that, with own eggs, it can actually just approach zero as well. So although the tool is there, it doesn't mean necessarily works. As we just saw, there is a difference between when people come to use IVF, which is over 35, and how successful it is, which is less than 35 as well. So there is that sort of mismatch of communication and information that we need to give out there to people so they can make their own informed decisions.
But also, I mean, expense of it. I mean, again, a lot of people, when they talk about the cost of it, actually they're not including all the drugs. I mean, I remember at one point I was on £250 worth of drugs a day. I mean, it was so, because I was so much older than the amount of drugs, it was so expensive and so. But also, I mean, I remember Professor Robert Winston made this point as a fertility expert. He said he's been in, you know, cancer clinics, he's been in, you know, IVF clinics, and he said if you want to talk about the most miserable, traumatized people on, it's people in IVF clinics, because the roller coaster, the up and the down, it's really very unpleasant experience. That, you know, jabbing yourself constantly every day, non-stop. Blood tests and things like it's kind of almost like a full-time job. And I just think so many women are counting on this as a future, and the men are happy to go, yeah, I'll settle down when I feel like it. And actually, a lot of people are looking at how they're having only one child when they would have preferred more, like me, or not having any children at all. And it's not just an economic disaster; it is for the country. It's just a personal disaster for people, because having children is one of the greatest joys in life.
Well, for many, obviously, there are a number of people who don't want to, but it is true to say that for the majority, that is correct. And it's also true to say exactly how you pointed there, that even having one child does not necessarily mean that people have reached what the reproductive sort of, you know, wants and needs. So I do hear quite a lot of people saying, oh, you already have a child, why do you want a second one? Don't be selfish. I say that's a little bit, it is quite the smugness of those that have. You know, there is no rule to say you're allowed to have 1, 2 or 3. It's what you want to have. And I think it's important to also point out there, when people think about IVF, is a lot of the times people think about that first sort of child. But of course, if they want to have a larger family, then it goes without saying that you have to start younger and earlier to try to achieve that sort of family size that you want. Again, that's part of the education that is required. And when it comes down to obviously funding and cost, what's also quite sad is that the proportion of a funded sort of on the NHS IVF cycle has gone down with time. So while it used to be 35%, so about a third of all cycles in 2019 were funded by the National Health Service, that's now dropped to 27%.
Yeah. So again,
I can only see one way this going.
It's a huge. I mean, it's a huge cost. It's a huge emotional drain. And again, but there's a, you know, having sex and unprotected sex earlier in life would be a simpler solution. Dr. Hippocrates Saris, really good to talk to you. He's consultant in reproductive medicine. Thank you so much for joining us. Philip Ingram, what do you make of this?
Well, I'm torn on it. You know, as a woman, you have to take lots of drugs. You've just criticised taking drugs for.
To have baby as opposed to fat jabs, which you don't need.
But the drugs have side effects. It's allowing parents to be older. We're seeing a surge in children with ADHD and autism and various other bits and pieces. Is there a link? There's so much more we need to know about this.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's why I'm just not entirely sure. I mean, I want everyone who wants a kid to be, who can afford to have a kid, to be able to have a kid. But I'm thinking we need to be giving people the right advice. And the right advice is you need to be having children younger, but we need to make that possible for so many couples who do want kids.